All roads lead back to Camarines Sur for presidential candidate and Vice President Leni Robredo. She is expected to cast her vote here in Karangkang Elementary School in Magarao Town. Naga City is the hometown of Robredo. This is the place where she grew up, where she met the love of her life, longtime Naga City Mayor and DILG Chief Jesse Robredo, and the place where they raised their three children, Aika, Trisha, and Jillian. But we know that in September 2021, she transferred her voter registration in Magarao, a move that would have allowed her to vote and to run for Camarines Sur governor, as Naga City is an independent component city. But of course, we knew that she has since decided to run for the presidency. Highly reliable sources from the Robredo campaign told us that Robredo spent Sunday yesterday together with her family. She heard Mass at the Archdiocese of Cáceres before visiting the grave of Jesse Robredo. And this is something that we expected. Robredo did this also just before she voted during the 2016 vice presidential race. And it really does make sense. Jesse was meant to be the only politician in the Robredo family. But when he died in a tragic plane crash in August 2012, that thrust Leni Robredo into the national political spotlight, and she waged two come-from-behind victories in the past two elections that she joined. In the 2013 congressional race, she slayed the well-entrenched Villafuerte clan here in Camarines Sur by defeating the matriarch, Nelly, for Camarines Sur 3rd District Congresswoman. And in 2016, she bested 5 male incumbent senators to become vice president, edging out the late dictator's son, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., by just over 200,000 votes. And 6 years later, Robredo and Marcos are head-to-head again for the highest position in the land. We expect Robredo to be here around 10 a.m. Pauunahin niya lang na bumoto ang kanyang mga anak sa Tabuco Central School sa Naga City. And we are already on standby here. Bea.
Hi, Mara. Marhay na aga. What's the mood sa Robredo campaign coming off that Makati meeting the Avance? Di ba ang laki-laki ng crowd? How are they feeling leading up to May 9, Election Day?
I would say, and this is something that I would borrow from one of my sources in the campaign, they are guardedly optimistic. Obviously, they're very happy at that massive show of force in Makati. It's a record-breaking crowd estimate for the Robredo campaign and the campaign of her running mate, Senator Kiko Pangilinan. 780,000 of their supporters trooped to the premier business district, and they came from not just from Metro Manila but all over the country. We've seen some of the supporters there coming from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Right after Robredo's speech, I was backstage and I saw that a lot of her staff, were crying, and they are quite hopeful. But of course, hindi mo kasi matatanggal yung kaba sa kanila, because not once did Robredo lead in any of the major pre-election surveys. It's always Marcos dominating, with Robredo trailing behind by by 2 digits. Yeah. And so even then, I think it was important for Robredo to really rally her supporters and her team during her meeting the Avance. It was a speech that primarily focused on celebrating the massive volunteer movement that her presidential bid inspired. It was also a chance for her to look back into all her struggles as vice president, and she ended it with words of hope and faith. She told her supporters na lakasan ng loob at maniwala that if they take a stand, nothing is impossible. And I think a lot of the Leni Kiko supporters, panghahawakan yun ngayong araw sa pagpunta nila sa kanilang mga presinto at sa kanilang pagboto. Bea?
JC, I think you have a question?
Yes, Mara. Well, we've seen yung amazing rallies in the past couple of weeks, culminating doon sa Makati rally. Pero as you mentioned earlier, doon sa mga surveys, si Marcos Jr. pa rin yung nangunguna up until the last Pulse Asia survey. So how do you think those rallies will translate into actual votes? Ano yung sinasabi ng mga kakampings dito, at paano sila nagre-react sa ganong klaseng surveys?
I have been covering the Robredo campaign since day one, and this is very accurate to say that one of the first instincts of certain supporters of the Leni Kiko tandem is to disregard those surveys. Hindi mo naman yun matatanggal sa kanila. Obviously, there's a certain tendency for people to be in denial, lalo na if you're feeling very strongly for a certain candidate. And so I think it was also very important for Robredo herself to say that she and her campaign team are taking the surveys seriously. But there's always that message that the true survey in these elections would be today, election day. But I think the last Pulse Asia survey puzzled a lot of not just the supporters but even people in the campaign team, because even in areas where Robredo actually managed to pull off massive show of force even in known enemy bailiwicks, bumaba siya ng malaki. Halimbawa sa Calabarzon, bumaba siya from 37% to 18%. And then in Davao, which is the bailiwick of President Rodrigo Duterte and his daughter, Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte, who is running as Marcos's running mate, bumaba si VP Leni Robredo to 1%. And to certain, even experts, it's a little bit puzzling because Robredo even gained allies in Davao. Pantaleon Alvarez, former speaker and Davao del Norte 1st District Representative, has been going all out ever since he dropped Senator Ping Lacson and started supporting Robredo. We know that he has been joining a lot of the negotiations together with the Robredo's key political advisors. But even then, Robredo is quite, just keep on rallying her supporters regardless of what those surveys say. The challenge for the supporters, of course, is to bring their energy from that months-long house-to-house campaigning, all of the soup kitchens that they did, all of the different activities that they've done, is to actually bring that in to the voting precincts and actually turn that energy into votes. And we will see by tonight, by tomorrow, if the efforts of the so-called Pink Revolution will actually pay off for Leni Robredo. Bea?
Mara, you've covered the Vice President a year or two before midway of her vice presidential term. As you mentioned earlier, right, her story, her political story at least, has been about overcoming seemingly impossible situations, at least in the context of Philippine politics. Have you noticed any change in Leni Robredo as a leader, as a politician, since she declared that she'd be running for president in 2022?
Definitely, she's more assertive now. She's more confident. The thing with Leni Robredo is that hindi niya kasi inambisyon na maging politiko. And the consistent narrative of her political career is that she always just steps up when she's called to do so. But when she does, she always brings with it, a certain confidence, aggressiveness on the campaign trail. I started covering her when she became vice president. 2018 na ako pumasok. But, of course, obviously, part of my work is to observe, the person deemed to be the opposition leader. And we've also seen the revolution of Leni Robredo as that figure. She has become more decisive. She has become more assertive and, kumbaga, more feisty, especially in her criticisms against the abusive policies of the Duterte administration, including the bloody drug war and Duterte's pacifist view on the West Philippine Sea. But, I would say that Robredo is also known to be just consistent. She's always been consistent in her morals, in her principles, in her position that she, if it doesn't have to be her running for office, she would. And this is something that we've seen in 2013, in 2016, and of course in 2022.
Mara, we have seen a groundswell of support for Vice President Leni Robredo in the past weeks. Pero what about Senator Kiko Pangilinan? How much has his chances changed over time? And how much did he ride on yung growing popularity and support for VP Leni Robredo?
Senator Kiko Pangilinan obviously benefited as well from the pink wave. Dinadala din kasi siya ng mga supporters ni Leni Robredo. There are certain volunteer groups, certain kakampinks who have really been, staunchly campaigning for a Leni Kiko tandem, and they have been voicing the messaging of Pangalinan's wife, megastar Sharon Cuneta, that a vote for Kiko Pangilinan is a vote to protect Leni Robredo. But, we've seen this kind of support for Kiko more on the side of the supporters. But when it comes to the politicians who, have the machinery in their own localities, many of the local kingpins are not necessarily supporting Pangilinan, and this is something that the Leni and Pangilinan campaign have to contend with in the past 90 days. The reality that there are certain politicians who are for Robredo but who do not want Pangilinan. Their choice, many of them would go for Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte. In a way, parang compromise na kasi nila ito. They'll support the opposition candidate, pero parang in a way, as a favor to the incumbent president, they will support the daughter. And of course, much has been said already kung gaano kalakas si Sara Duterte. There are also certain quarters pushing for a Robredo-Soto tandem with Senate President Vicente Soto III. And that entailed Pangilinan really just navigating that complicated political dynamics. Sakripisyo kasi itong pagtakbo ni Pangilinan bilang Vice Pangulo para kay Leni Robredo. He would have easily won, probably, or would have easily staged a senatorial re-election candidacy much easier, because before he decided to run for vice president, he is well within the so-called magic 12. But when Robredo's unity talks with other presidential candidates fell through, and she turned to Pangilinan to be her running mate, pumayag si Pangilinan. Ito ang kanyang sacrifice. And in the 90-day campaign, he has been making a lot of sacrifices for Robredo sa mga areas, sa mga probinsya kung saan yung mga local leaders ay hindi siya sinusuportahan. Minsan hindi na pumupunta si Pangilinan eh. If only to make sure that Robredo will be able to secure the votes in that particular area.
The complications nga na hindi tandem.
Oh, but may I add, of course, that regardless of the Leti or the Rosa push with Robredo, she has always stood by Pangilinan, and even in her meeting the Avance, yung naglista siya ng mga 3 reminders niya for her supporters. Unang-una doon ay iboto sa Pangilinan. So this is something that you would like to credit Leni Robredo. Other politicians might have, abandoned the running mate if it would mean they would gain more votes. But solid siya behind Pangilinan. Bea?
Thank you, Mara. Yun nga yung complications, because in the Philippines, we don't elect a tandem. We elect the president and vice president separately. Thank you, Mara, reporting live from Magarao in Camarines Sur. We'll be returning to Mara later when the vice president casts her vote.